And welcome to another episode of the Atlantic CIL podcast. I'm your host, Donald Campbell, the director of the Atlantic Center for Independent Living, and we're here with Dawn Lolla, one of our friends from the BNI, which stands for the Business Networking International Group. And before we started, I thought I was going to butcher that, but I didn't. It's like lights, camera, action. Sometimes you freeze when the light goes on. But we are going to talk about, and this is a topic we've touched on before in the podcast, we're going to talk about substance use and living with addiction and recovery, which is the most important part. And Don's going to talk about how you can maintain, there is a bright side, you can get through it. It's not something that you are unable to overcome. So hi, Dawn, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Donald. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very fortunate to be able to be on here today and to share my story.
All right, so let's get right into it. Before we started, you said you were clean and sober for about 41 years. So start at the beginning of the journey. Let's just start there.
So it's an interesting thought for me to imagine that a day at a time, which is the way I always like to look at it, that I've been sober and clean for almost 41 years. I don't even feel like I'm 41, but unfortunately I really am much more than that. The journey always starts before the substance is introduced, because addiction is in my opinion, and everybody looks at this a little bit differently sometimes, but in my opinion, addiction is far less about the actual substance than it is about what led you there in the first place. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My parents divorced when I was 12. I'm one of 6 kids. So had a single mom and a non-participating dad, from the time I was 12 years old. And I was very rebellious, and probably a lot of my behavior was just attention-seeking behavior. I'm 5th of 6 kids. You're kind of far down the line. And so I'm loud and I talk a lot, and those things have not changed one bit. And I can't even tell you when I had my first drink or my first cigarette. I mean, I know I was like way young when I first started smoking cigarettes, and that's just a risk-taking behavior. Whether you want to feel it's gateway or not, it's a risk-taking behavior, and that leads to other risk-taking behaviors. And so I did those kind of things. And quite honestly, by the time I was 16 years old, I was basically a train wreck. I was getting high every day on whatever substance I could put my hands on. And, comparing with things now, I'm kind of grateful that I'm not in the situation now, because things are so very different. But, I was smoking weed on the way to school, taking a handful of pills at school. Alcohol is a whole lot harder to hide. That was more of my weekend thing. That's not to say that I didn't drink during the week and at school, because I did those things as well. I got in a lot of trouble. I didn't do well in school. And I had one very important thing in my life, and one very important, I had some important people, but one in particular, I'm a singer, and I feel that I have been gifted, my voice, and something that I cultivated and I trained. And I had a rule that I never went to voice instruction, choir class, any of those things under the influence. And about midway through my sophomore year, I broke that rule. And it really did impact me. And it's so funny, because everybody's bottom, we talk, a lot in recovery about hitting rock bottom. And that's different for every person. As I said, I had scrapes with the law. I had lots of scrapes at school. I don't even want to bore you with the details. I'm lucky to be alive. I will promise you that. I did a lot of things that God looks out for drunks and babies. That's what my mom always said. And it's a good thing.
So what was, and you don't have to get into that specific, but what was your bottom? What was that? Was it that moment of going to your choir class and the things you felt special that were special to you under the influence, or was it like what made you go, okay, I can't do this anymore?
There were some things leading up to it, Donald. I had actually had a pretty nasty argument with one of my sisters who was keen to what was going on with me. She maybe not as bad, but I was almost 5'5". I weighed less than 100 pounds because of how much amphetamine I was doing. And she was seeing me, lose the weight, and I was just really so thin, and my moods and behavior were all over the place. And so she actually had gotten her hands on a pamphlet from Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think it was entitled like, "Is AA for me?" or something like that. And it had a list of questions. And during this argument, she pulls it out and she starts asking me the questions. Do you drink with the intention of getting drunk? I'm like, well, yeah.
Why else am I doing it?
Do you sometimes drink before you go out in case, there's not enough? Well, yeah. Of course I pregame. I don't think we called it that 40 years ago, but, is it affecting relationships in your life? And it definitely was. I had a boy break up with me. My boyfriend at the time broke up with me because I was embarrassing him at events because of how drunk I would get. And so she started asking me these questions, and I actually was really surprised that these were, how many I was answering yes to. And I dismissed that at the time. And that was only a month or so before. She did tell me that if I didn't get my act together, she was going to tell my mom what was going on, and unfortunately, my mom was not terribly present in our lives at that point either. She was doing what she was doing. She was working a lot. She had a boyfriend, I had older siblings who would take care of me. So right. She was kind of absent. And so, she threatened to kind of bring my mom in on what was going on. So then, like I said, shortly after that, I had broken this rule to myself. That was early February of that year. My birthday is February 23rd, and I had a party at my house for myself. And I actually apparently drank so much and took whatever. I ended up in a functional 7-day blackout. Wow. I don't remember anything for the entire week. Went to school, went to detention because I had that every day. Did whatever. I don't know. I don't know what I did because I don't remember. I remember walking through my hometown, which is very small. And I remember kind of coming out of this blackout, and I was with someone who I normally did not associate with, except when I needed to buy drugs. But I normally wouldn't hang out with this person. Right. And I was like, where are we? Like, what's happening? And she's like, what do you mean, where are we? We just went to McDonald's. I had no idea where I was, how I got there, what day it was, nothing.
Wow, that is scary. That is a wake-up call.
It was terrifying.
It was scary.
It was terrifying. And I knew that I was out of control, but I did not believe that those kind of things happened. And if I did, I don't think I believed they would happen to me.
Right.
And it's scary to this day, considering thinking about what could have happened, what may have happened.
Right.
Because I don't know.
Right.
I was fortunate enough that being a product of an alcoholic home, I had been introduced to Alateen, which is a 12-step recovery support group for children from alcoholic homes. So I had a little knowledge about this recovery thing and this 12-step thing. And I at least knew what to do and where to go that night. And I did go to my first AA meeting that night. So that was March 1st. Actually, it's 42 years. I just did some math. It was 1981. No, it was 82. It's 41 years. My math is terrible. It was March 1st of 1982. And I had a rough few days. I honestly, Donald, I probably should have been in a medically supervised detox because of the amount of crap that was in my system. But I was afraid, and my siblings helped cover my situation from my mom, and they stayed with me, especially my one brother, Scott, stayed with me while I detoxed for a couple of days. And that was also terrifying, convulsions and
Right.
sweating, like it was awful. It was awful. But everything I went through, everything I've gone through has me where I am now. So I am one of those people who is grateful. I am grateful for what it took to get me here.
Right.
But the interesting thing is now I'm a sophomore in high school. All my friends party, but what do I do now?
I know. That's a good question.
So, I went to a lot of meetings, AA and Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous meetings. I did meet some younger people, but no one my age, really no one my age at the time. And so I made a lot of good friends that way. And I did, in a sense, replace the partying with, with meetings. And that's important to do for a while, because in order to stay clean and sober, you do have to change people, places, and things. Right. It doesn't work any other way. It just doesn't. People like to think that they can just stop using and continue their life the way it was. And if your life was okay the way it was, you'd be okay. Right. So you have to make big changes. And I was 16.
Right. And that's why I think that's a great point, Dawn, because I've, talked to a lot of people about this. I've read about it, and it's like, you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
So, some people will be like,
isn't it Einstein that said that's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, and it doesn't work.
Exactly.
And I've been around recovery long enough to know and to see that there's been a lot of people over the years who have tried it. They think they can still do the things that they used to do and go the places they used to go. And I'm not saying you can't ever be around alcohol again as long as you live. Right. I'm saying if your place was, Bob's Bar, and that's where you like to hang out, you can't hang out there. You just can't.
You got to break the pattern.
You have to. It's like with any other bad habit or addiction, and I'm certainly not minimizing addiction to just a bad habit, because it's not. And I understand that there's so much more that goes into it, because as I said early on, I believe that it's much less about what got you there than the substance itself. So there's a lot of personal work that has to go into recovery for you to maintain long-term recovery. I've known people who, they just stopped. They stopped on their own, and they stopped for a long time, but they didn't do any work. They didn't dig into why. What was the why? Why were you trying to escape? Because that's what it's about, right?
Right.
I had somebody just very recently tell me that I was wrong, that I could smoke pot if I wanted to, because marijuana is not chemically addictive. And I said, well, then you know nothing about addiction, because it has nothing to do with that. It had to do with the escape.
Right.
And why did I need to do that? Why did I feel the need to escape? What was I escaping from?
Right.
And for all of us, it's different. And there are a lot of layers to it.
Right.
Insecurity, fear, anger,
anxiety, facing things you don't want to deal with.
All of those things, And so a lot of personal work does have to go into maintaining long-term sobriety. And listen, for me, the 12th step of, helping others and practicing the principles in all my affairs, that's the 12th step for a reason. It wraps it all up. And, that's why I came on the podcast. That's why 41 plus or whatever years later, however many it is, I still go to meetings. I don't go to 5 and 6 and 7 meetings a week like I did when I was getting sober, but I need to always remember that one drink, one use could potentially put me right back to where I was.
Right.
And I have people say that to me all the time. Well, you've been sober a long time, but you can have wine, right? Only if I want to die.
Yeah. Yes.
And truly, that is how I look at it. Do I know that if I pick up a drink or a drug that it would lead to an untimely death or the ruin of my current life? No, I don't know that, but it certainly isn't worth chancing because I have a wonderful life.
Right.
And I do all sorts of things. I mean, I certainly don't sit in church basements every night.
Right.
And I think that's a fear of some people newly in recovery is this my life now?
Right. It's all I'm doing is recovering all day, 24/7.
Pardon me. But it even says in the AA literature that the purpose of AA and recovery is to get us back into the mainstream of life. And church basements are not the mainstream of life. There's certainly a better alternative than the gutter. Which is what we used to talk about, back in the day. It's certainly a better alternative than death, which is kind of where I was probably headed, especially with, as I said, that the things that I did at 16, 15, and 14, I'm glad my mother doesn't know about any of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Did you ever get to open up to your mom about it, or did you?
Eventually, yes, it was. I had to, but I was glad that it was after that initial period, because that would have scared my mom. I'm just glad for me it worked out the way it did. But I did open up to my mom about it, and it was very hard for her. She felt a lot of responsibility because she was absent and had no idea what was going on. And I don't know that would have made any difference whatsoever.
Who knows?
It may have prolonged my active addiction because I would have had to hide it more, and the fact that she was absent may have just sped things up for me. So I don't have any resentment about my mom and her parenting or any of that kind of thing. I don't hold her responsible in any way, shape, or form. Is it as a hereditary thing? Did I get my alcoholism from my dad? Probably. But I'm not, that's not a debate that I even care about, because my addiction is my addiction and my recovery are solely mine. And, I'm fortunate my dad did stop drinking before he passed away. And so I was happy about that. But yeah, my mom was very supportive once I, opened up to her, and that was necessary because I was 16. I needed rides to meetings.
Yes. Pretty practical.
I mean, I rode my bike a lot, but thank goodness I grew up in a small town so I could get around a little bit. But so yeah, she was supportive and very proud of me, and that was important.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk about too, since it was 41 years ago. What do you think about how we made progress on the stigma around addiction? Have we made progress? I think this is a really important part of your podcast too. It's sometimes people are afraid to talk about this stuff, or they don't want to talk about this stuff. And I just think, I love that struggle with this stuff. It's a lot healthier when we don't act like it's, some unheard of thing or there's something wrong with you. And I think we've made some progress in that, but even the ignorant questions people ask you, oh, I'm going to tell you what you can do with your addiction. It's just not it's the equivalent of somebody telling me with cerebral palsy what I should be, oh, you can climb this mountain, or you can do this. It's I'll let you know what I can do.
Yes.
Don't tell me.
So that's such how have we done with the stigma? There's layers. Here's the thing. We do a lot of education about substance use and substance abuse. I don't think we do enough about the recovery process, because I don't think people who are not in addiction or who haven't had an experience with anyone like that, they don't really understand that, no, I can't. I can't. No, I can't just have a glass of wine. No, I can't just smoke a joint with you right now. They just don't understand yet. So I still think we lack a little bit in the education realm. One of the reasons that I am willing to come on this podcast, it's Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Well, yeah, it is for those who want it to be, but I have never in the long term part of my, recovery. I am not shy about talking about it. Most people who know me know. And I don't even keep it quiet for people who don't know me. If I'm out with new people and they're like, oh, you want a glass of wine? I say flat out, I go, no, thanks, I'm in recovery. And because I want that normalization.
Right.
So, and I also want it out there so that if anybody ever that I know is struggling, maybe they see that I have a full and awesome life. And so they trust the process a little bit more. Maybe they just need someone outside of their close knit to be able to come to and say, I need help. And if I reach one person on this podcast who says, wow, I didn't ever look at it that way, or I didn't know that, then I'm thrilled to talk about it. I don't think I'm cured. I don't believe in the word recovered. Some people say recovered. I will not say recovered.
Right.
I am in recovery. I always will be, because I will always have to do the work. I will always have to take a look at myself in the mirror, make sure that I'm checking my thinking, my actions all the time. And I like that. I feel good about that. Honestly, I had a conversation with a friend about people who've never done any self-discovery. They just kind of get up, go to work, do their thing, and they haven't had the benefit of any self-discovery. And I feel bad for them.
I totally, you're preaching to my choir. I totally agree with you. One of the things that we talk about at the center when we're helping people is how important self-reflection is and accountability is, and looking at yourself. It's the hardest thing in the world. It's so much easier to be like, oh, this didn't work out because of something else or something, And I'm not saying, look, we all get dealt certain hands, and there are genetics and family situations, but we all, I think this is what you're saying, is you also have to see what you can control and take your inventory of yourself. Okay, what can I do to have a better life? And I think that's the hardest thing. I know that a lot of people struggle with it, me included. It's just tough to look in the mirror, but it's the key to growth. It's the key to growth.
It most certainly is. And, I continue to read, not just, I reread the AA Big Book. I mean, it's on my nightstand. It's never far from me. My other half, boyfriend, dude, I don't know what you call him, guy that I live with for a long time, he is not in recovery, but he doesn't have a drinking problem that I am aware of.
Yes.
But there's, he's very supportive of me. We go out, he will have his cocktails, his wine, whatever, but I didn't do that. And I would never have done that in the beginning. You have to build a very solid foundation in your recovery with the people around you. I was very protected in the beginning with making sure I fully surrounded myself only with people in recovery. I didn't hang around with any of my friends from school anymore. I made new friends at school,
right?
Who didn't party. I found that there were actually people in school who didn't know.
You were busy. You were busy at the time.
I was, and obviously I started to do better in school. I ended up going to college, which I never thought I would. And I still sing. I sing in a rock and roll band. I sing in an acoustic trio. So I get out there and I get to share that, which I don't imagine I would be doing today if I had not made a big change very early on.
That must have been tough because you were quite young, and to reset your whole life is that's tough.
It was tough. And everybody's journey is tough in whatever it is. Everybody's journey is tough for them. Yeah, I was 16. So that's a big thing. You're dealing with all the teenage stuff already.
Yes.
And then throw in, I'm just gonna, upend my entire social structure and construct, and have to make all new friends. It was like going to a new school practically. And staying away from the people who were bad influences, and
Right.
it's not their fault. That's not what I'm saying, but
Right. But you can't, it's
pressure
not your job to change them. So you can only remove
and peer
yourself.
pressure at 16, a 16-year-old girl still trying to figure her own self out. And now I have to figure out this, recovery thing. And I was, again, very fortunate that I did discover a couple of teachers at my high school who I felt confident to confide in. And they were very, very supportive. And that was great. That was really great to be able to know that I had some support there. And I think anybody, that's important, that you really do seek out people, even if they're maybe not in recovery, but if you're an adult and you're trying to do this and you have to go to work every day, and the people, this is your job, and maybe you partied with these people. So
Right.
great. Now what do I do? I'm supposed to change people, places, and things, and I can't change people or places because I got to go to work with these people every day.
Right.
It's still a choice. There's
Right.
got to be somebody, you know what I mean, that you can connect with. And that's why it's so important to really, in my opinion, like the 12-step recovery programs are the way to go. Rehab is important for a lot of people just to be able to remove themselves from people, places, and things until their body is clean of the chemicals. Right. and the substances. But once you come out, you're back into reality. And so you have to make choices now. I believe fully that when the chemicals are still in your system, you really don't have much in the way of choice.
Right.
But once you are clean of the chemicals and been shown a way, then it's a choice. And, we get to make these choices every day on how we're going to be, whether it's with an addiction to alcohol, drugs, food, sex, TV, game systems, whatever. There's addictive components to those things. Mm-hmm. They do cause chemical changes. And so do you pick up the controller for the game system or not? It's a choice. Do you pick up that glass of wine or not? Right. It is a choice. Yes. And I get to make it every day. And I always say that. I don't say I have to say no. I get to say no. Right. And I'm really grateful for that because, again, on the path I was going, I don't deserve to be sitting here. Right. So, and I'll tell you, I am not blowing smoke up anybody's, I tell you, I love my life. And like, I even joke with people all the time. They're like, drink? I'm like, no, I'm way too much without it. Way too much without it.
You don't need it, though.
I don't. And nobody does once they do the work.
Right. So tell us about that, because I want people to see the positive too. Like there is another side to it. Tell us about your life now and kind of what you enjoy now. And
oh my gosh. So as I said, I get to share my singing with people, which always makes me happy. I was married for many years, 20 something years, and I have 2 grown children, and my former husband and I enjoy a very friendly relationship, which blows people's minds all the time. But, marriages don't always work out, and so just because I was in recovery and doing the work doesn't mean that everything was perfect. Right. It certainly doesn't mean that. I've been through struggles in my recovery. Early on, when I was in college, my gram passed away, and that was really challenging for me. As I said, I've been through a divorce. My dad passed away while I was in recovery. And actually, a month ago, my mom passed away. And these are all pretty significant challenges that everyone faces, but people in recovery may have to do a little bit more to keep balanced during times like that. I remember one of the most difficult days for me in recovery when my grand passed away. That was very difficult. I was 19. I was far away from my family, and I struggled for a bit, wanting to drink. I wanted to escape that sadness. So I had to stick really close, go to a lot of meetings, stay, be in touch with my sponsor regularly, and I got through it. 9/11 was a very difficult day for me. It was a terrifying day. And lots of people around me, even people who normally wouldn't be. I mean, people were day drinking,
Right.
like, what the
Yeah.
hell's going on in our world? And there,
Right.
and the funny thing is, I actually didn't really want to drink that day. I wanted to go smoke cigarettes, which I had quit a long time before.
Right. Right.
But an addiction's an addiction, right? And I don't know where one thing leads to another. So I like to continue to do the things that I know work. And so, as I said, it's not that I haven't had difficulties and struggles and scary things happen that, I guess a normal person might want to just come home from a hard day once in a while and be like, I just have a little drink and take the edge off. And so I have to find different ways to do that.
Right.
And that's what people in recovery need to do, is find different ways to take that edge off or to release that stress or whatever it is. Me, literally, I can turn on the music and sing at the top of my lungs, loud, really, really, really loud. And that's a very great release for me. Some people can go for a run. Some people, just can chill in a chair with a good book, and those things just kind of center them and bring them back down into an air, a space that is less scary or easier to manage. I don't know that people without addiction have to really pay that much attention to that.
Right.
Or someone who's in recovery really has to check it a lot. Like, where am I at? Am I stressed out? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Those are 4 things that really play badly for people in recovery. Resentments, holding grudges really, really play badly for people who are in recovery. And so we have to check those things, I think, far more than someone maybe who doesn't have addiction, I guess. I don't know. I am not that person. I know that I do. And again, it's kind of something I'm grateful for, because I feel like it just makes me a better person every day.
Right. You have to have a heightened kind of self-awareness of things going on. I'm sorry to hear about your mom.
Thank you.
I think that's awesome that you're still close to your ex. I always think that's so cool that, like, you can, just because you get divorced from somebody doesn't mean you have to spend the rest of your life hating each other.
It so freaks people out. It so freaks people out. Like, I'll have a party, I have, an event at the house, a Christmas gathering or whatever, and my former husband and his girlfriend come over, and people are like, I'm like,
you married him for a reason. You liked him. It's just the marriage didn't work out.
He's a nice guy. We just didn't work,
Yes.
So it's really good. And I like doing things that other people like to do. I go camping. We bought a camper this year. I'm pretty excited. I love going to the beach in the summer. I like traveling. And I do all those things. I've gone on cruises and I've been very fortunate with my travel. I've gone places I never imagined. I grew up really poor. My family was really, really poor. And I never imagined that I would do some of the things I did, and certainly would not have done had I maintained the path I was on. I have maintained a home-based business for nearly 20 years. I had it, a regular day job, and I did this little home-based thing on the side. And a few years ago, I decided to make it my full-time gig. So I work from home. I have a very successful home-based business. And that's it. Like, my kids are grown.
Tell us about your kids. How many kids do you have?
So I have 2 children. Well, I have 2 grown people that I claim. My son, Mark, is 34 years old, and he lives out in Colorado. And my daughter, Katie, is 32 years old, and she's married, and she and her husband live in North Carolina. So neither of them are close to me here in New Jersey, which makes me sad. But I talk to my son almost every day. We're very, very, very close. And I am as well with my daughter, but I get to see her a whole lot more. So I don't mention that I talk to her all the time as much. But, and Mark and I will FaceTime, and, sometimes I get a chance to go out there, and he hates coming back to New Jersey. He loves it out there.
He's not a fan of New Jersey.
No. If he could just snowboard and climb rocks every day, he'd be so happy. But he has to work in order to support those things.
Right. That's that little snag that happens.
Yep. So, and my kids have never known me, obviously, have never known me in my active addiction, but they are very well aware of my recovery. And again, they're, it's how they were brought up. It doesn't faze them. Yeah, no, my mom doesn't drink.
Right. It's
You know,
they're normal. Yeah.
And that's where we need to be going with
Right.
it.
That is
It
where we
really is where we need to be going with it. But, from a Center for Independent Living standpoint and the disability portion of this, addiction is classified as, as a disability.
It is. Yep.
But as my friend Jake Hackett always says, it's just different abilities.
Yes.
And that's, I've been given some insights and some different gifts that I may not have gotten had I not gone through what I went through. And I'm very grateful for that.
Right. And that's such an important thing to say, because, some people still have an old mindset like, oh, addiction is not a disability. And that's just not, it's just not accurate. It's just not true. And also you can have a disability and also have an addiction, like, on top of the disability. Like, we just need to look at the broader sense of it. And like, I love what you said, Don, that's where we need to be heading, just the new, no judgment and the normalization of it. So people don't feel afraid to get help, because, I've really focused in on your stories, and the keys were just those people in your life that were one that called you out. Good for your sister for calling you out. I mean,
Yep.
this pamphlet sounds like you.
Yep.
Here it is. And also those teachers who were like, we're here for you.
Yeah. I know I've said the word grateful probably 20 times, but I am for every bit of that. I told my sister all the time, I credit her with saving my life, and she downplays it, but that had to be a hard thing for her to do. Calling someone out on their addiction is hard.
Yes.
It's hard. It's been hard for me with people in my life that I've loved that have, had addiction issues. Maybe you would think that because I've been through it, I have a different perspective, but it's hard. And so she did it, and I'm grateful every day that she did. But yes, I want people, to not be afraid to ask for help and to look in the mirror, because that's the hardest part.
Yes.
Because really, addiction is a self-diagnosed disease. I can tell you lots of people who I think should, probably stop drinking, but it's never going to happen just because I said it. And that's what my sister said to me. Well, I didn't do anything. You had to make that, you had to come to that realization. I said, yeah, but that
she gave you that push. She gave you that push.
And it was, she wasn't doing it out of malice,
No.
We may have been in an argument at the time, but she had to have given that some forethought to be able to be prepared with that pamphlet. And she knew I was struggling.
Right.
So I do think it's important that, as loving a way as we can, if there are people in our lives who need to maybe be checked, help them along the way. But it has to be done with love and concern, because if it's done, because you want them to change, that doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. If it's just you, like you said, the person with the substance use issue is not on board, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. It doesn't matter.
And let me tell you, that's one of the hardest things to watch.
Right.
I still have people in my life now who struggle with addiction, and, I just try to keep open lines of communication. I don't allow them too close in my life, because it is toxic. It's toxic not just for someone who's in recovery. Being around people with addiction is toxic for someone. So I just try to let them know that I always be here for them, but that I can't have them close to me right now.
Right.
Until they decide to go a different way.
And the key thing about your story is it's not like your sister said that to you. We're like, okay, let's go to AA right now. It stuck with you, and when you were ready.
Yeah, I had to marinate that a little bit.
Yeah, you're like, okay, that's not me. I don't know what she's talking about. And then, oh, wait a minute, this could be me. So, sometimes I try to remind myself on all facets of life. Sometimes we say things, and if we don't get the instant reaction we thought we should, it's like, oh, I failed. But like telling somebody, you notice something, you love them and you care about them, they might not be ready to hear that, but when they are, if they ever are, they're going to remember who said that to them. Just like they're going to remember who judged them. and made them feel bad.
That's very true. But planting the seed is never a bad thing. It's never a bad thing.
All right. Well, this has been awesome. You know, this has been one of my favorite episodes because just so refreshingly honest and telling it like it is, which I think, you know, if there's somebody out there struggling, one, there's great organizations that can help, like the center. We can definitely get you connected to resources. But, you know, even if you're just listening to this and you're like, I'm not ready to face this, maybe this is me, that's okay too. But, you know, just know that there's like another side to this, and there's people all around life who are successful, who go through addiction, who go through substance use. You know, I just watched, and we'll close out with this, I just watched a great show on Hulu called Dope Sick about the opioid crisis and how certain communities were targeted with these Oxycontin pills. And, you know, it just made me realize, like, we think so much of addiction is, you know, oh, that could never happen to me. But like, it's just, there are so many facets of life that draw people to it, where it makes sense of why people go down that road. Why, you know, people are struggling and they're trying to escape, like Dawn said, and there are these ways to do it, and they don't maybe have the most healthy coping skills. So they go down that road. So I just encourage people not to judge and to really keep an open mind about this stuff. And just know, if you're struggling, that there are resources out there, and that we have made some progress in getting rid of the shame and the stigma, and coming forward also helps get rid of the shame and the stigma. So people should know that. Do you have any closing words, Dawn?
No, actually, you wrapped it up beautifully, because if people are struggling, coming to terms with it really does lift a lot of that burden, that shame, that guilt, because without the change, the shame and the guilt are always going to be there.
Yes.
You know, making the change and taking the steps to living a better life is the best success that you can offer yourself and those around you, to show that you care about not just yourself, but them. So if anybody does need any help at all with this, the center is such a great opportunity to get connected with the resources necessary. But there most definitely is a very full, awesome life on the other side of addiction. And it's important that people know that long-term, clean, sober, fun, awesome, successful living is most definitely an option, and it's doable.
Yes. Well, thank you so much again, Dawn. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in for another episode of the Atlantic CIL podcast. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.